The desert was cruel that summer. The sun hung like a blazing brand in the sky, and every living thing that hadn't died yet seemed to be hanging on out of stubborn pride. Eli Turner was one of them. His ranch sat on the edge of nothing, a few shrunken cattle, a dried-up well, and a cabin that creaked when the wind touched it. His father used to say, "The land gives what you give it." But Eli had given everything, sweat, blood, hope, and now it seemed the land had stopped giving back. He wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned on his fence post, eyes scanning the horizon. Dust drifted in the distance like smoke, but out here, that could mean anything, a herd, a storm, or worse, riders. He listened. For a long time, there was nothing but the cry of a lone hawk overhead. Then he heard it, faint, desperate, a voice carried on the wind. A woman's cry. He froze, straining his ears. It came again, a sound of pain, far off near the canyon's edge. Eli dropped his hammer and started running. His boots struck the hard earth, kicking up sand and sweat as he sprinted toward the sound. The cries grew weaker, and just when he thought he might have imagined it, he saw something moving beyond a patch of mesquite trees, 2 horses wandering loose, saddles torn, reins dragging. Then he saw them, 2 women stumbling through the dirt, barely upright, clothes torn, faces pale under streaks of dust. One was trying to hold the other, whose arm hung limp and bleeding. For a second, Eli froze. He knew the paint on their faces, the red and black markings of the Apache. Every rancher in New Mexico had heard the stories. Trespass their land, steal a horse, or so much as look at them wrong, and you'd be found without your scalp come morning. But what he saw wasn't danger. It was desperation. He moved before he could talk himself out of it. "Hey," he called out, raising his hands. "I ain't here to hurt you." The older of the 2 women, tall, fierce eyes that glimmered even through exhaustion, stepped in front of the other, clutching a small blade in her good hand. She looked ready to die fighting. The younger one, trembling and half-conscious, clung to her side. Eli stopped a few paces away. "Let me help," he said quietly. "She's bleeding bad." The woman's jaw tightened. For a moment, she looked ready to strike. But then the younger one sagged to her knees, a weak moan escaping her lips. The older woman's eyes flickered with panic. That was all the answer Eli needed. He rushed forward, catching the fainting girl before she hit the dirt. "Come on," he muttered, slinging her over his shoulder. "My place ain't far." He half expected a knife in his back before he reached the ranch, but when he glanced behind him, the older sister followed, limping, wary, but following. Back at the cabin, he laid the wounded girl, the younger one, on his bed. Her arm was slashed open, the wound deep and angry. He tore a clean shirt into strips and poured whiskey over the cut as she flinched. "Sorry, miss," he murmured. "Hurts now, saves later." He cleaned the wound, wrapped it tight, then sat back with a sigh. The older woman watched his every move, her hand never leaving the knife she'd tucked into her belt. When he offered her water, she hesitated, then took it. They didn't speak for a while, just stared at each other like 2 animals unsure if the other might bite. Finally, she said, "Why you help?" Her English was broken but sharp. Eli shrugged. "'Cause someone's gotta." Her brow furrowed. "Many white men, not help Apache." "I ain't like most men," he said simply. She studied him for a long time, as if testing the truth in his eyes. Then she looked down at her sister. "Her name Noki," she said softly. "My name Allah." "Eli," he replied. Over the next 2 days, Eli did what he could. He fed them what little he had, beans, bread, jerky. He boiled water for washing, stitched Noki's wound when it reopened, and kept a rifle near the door in case anyone came looking. He'd heard the bounty hunters rode these parts, hunting anything that moved and spoke Apache. By the second night, Noki could sit up. Her smile was weak but warm. She thanked him with eyes that said more than her words could. Allah, though, remained guarded. She helped care for her sister, but every sound outside made her stiffen. Once, when Eli stepped too close, she reached for her knife before catching herself. That night, as the fire flickered low, Eli asked, "What happened to you two?" Allah hesitated, then answered, "Hunters. They kill our guards, take us for trade." Her eyes burned. "We escape, run 3 days. Your father know." She nodded once. "Chief Taza Greyhawk, he think we dead." Eli leaned back, rubbing his jaw. He'd heard the name. Even the U.S. Army spoke it with a mix of fear and respect. If this man thought his daughters were dead, the land would soon run red with revenge. "You need to get back to him," Eli said. Allah looked at him sharply. Too far. Too dangerous for you. I've been through worse, he said with a faint grin. I'll take you. Her eyes narrowed. You would ride into Apache land. You die, maybe, he said, adjusting his hat. But not today. At dawn, he saddled his 2 horses and loaded what little food and water he had left. Allah argued the whole way, telling him to turn back. Noki, pale but smiling, rode behind him quietly. When the cabin disappeared behind them, Eli didn't look back. He'd made his choice. The desert stretched ahead, endless and unforgiving. The heat shimmered, and the horses stumbled over dry stone. They rode from sunrise to sunset, stopping only to rest or find shade. At night, when the stars came out, Allah told stories in her language, soft, rhythmic words that drifted like the wind. Eli didn't understand, but somehow he didn't need to. He began to see the strength in her, the fire that wouldn't break. Noke's gentleness balanced it, her laughter faint but like music in the heavy silence. For the first time in years, Eli felt something stir inside him, something he'd thought was gone. Hope. On the 3rd day, as they crossed a narrow pass, the echo of gunfire split the air. Eli cursed, diving off his horse. The bounty hunters had found them, 4 of them, armed and cruel, closing in fast. Get down, he shouted. Bullets sparked off the rocks. Allah fired back with Eli's spare rifle, her aim deadly and sure. Noki clung to the horses, trembling. Then Eli felt it, the searing sting of lead tearing through his shoulder. He dropped, his vision spinning. Allah grabbed him, dragging him behind cover. Fool man, she snapped, pressing cloth to his wound. Guess I deserve that, he groaned, teeth gritted. The fight raged until sunset, but finally the bounty hunters retreated, their silhouettes fading into the red horizon. Eli lay there, bleeding and half delirious, as Allah and Noki worked to keep him alive. Their hands, gentle but strong, bandaged his shoulder, their voices whispering prayers to the spirits. When night fell, he lay staring at the stars, their faces blurred above him. Reckon I'll be fine, he muttered. Allah shook her head, her voice softer now. You help us, we not forget. By dawn, the desert air cooled. Noki smiled weakly. We close. One more ridge. Eli could barely stand, but he mounted his horse anyway. The land ahead shimmered, red mesas and dark cliffs. Once we cross, Allah said, we are home. Eli nodded, blood staining his sleeve. Then let's go home. He didn't know that waiting beyond that ridge were 100 Apache warriors, and the hardest test of his life. The first thing Eli heard as they crested the ridge was the thunder of hooves. It came like a storm from nowhere, shaking the ground beneath them. Ayla's horse reared, Noki gasped, and Eli instinctively reached for his rifle even though his arm throbbed and his vision swam. Before he could draw it, a whistling sound split the air, an arrow struck the dirt inches from his boot. Another followed, and then another. Don't move, Allah hissed, pulling on his reins. Out of the rocks and sand, they appeared, Apache warriors, fierce and silent, faces painted in black and red, eyes sharp as knives. Within seconds, they surrounded the 3 riders. Every bow was drawn, every spear pointed. Eli could feel their judgment before anyone spoke. He'd heard stories of men torn apart for less. One of the warriors barked something in Apache, and Allah shouted back. Her voice was steady but urgent, her tone filled with emotion Eli couldn't understand. The warriors hesitated, glancing at one another. Then, from the center of the group, a figure stepped forward, tall, broad, wearing a headdress of white eagle feathers. His presence silenced everything, even the horses stopped moving. Chief Taza Greyhawk. Eli recognized him instantly, not from sight, but from the way the others looked at him, the weight of respect that followed his every breath. The chief's eyes were dark, ancient, carrying the strength of generations. He looked first at his daughters, and something in his face softened for the briefest moment before turning to stone again. Then his gaze landed on Eli. A long silence stretched between them, heavy as the desert heat. Finally, the chief spoke in English, his voice deep and steady. My daughters were taken by white hunters, he said. And now they return, with one. Eli's throat went dry. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I didn't take them, chief. I found them lost, hurt. I only brought them home. The chief's jaw tightened. Many men speak of mercy before they die. Eli swallowed. He could feel every arrow still aimed at him, the tension like a drawn string ready to snap. He looked at Allah and Noki, hoping they'd speak, and they did, both stepping forward, talking quickly in their language, their voices carrying the weight of truth. They pointed at his wound, at the torn shirt, at the blood dried down his arm. Ayla's tone was fierce, almost pleading. Noke's eyes shone with tears. For a long time, the chief said nothing. Then he raised his hand, and the warriors lowered their weapons slightly. He spoke again, but this time in Apache. The crowd shifted, murmuring. Eli couldn't understand the words, but he understood their rhythm, the sound of a father struggling between gratitude and suspicion. Finally, the chief motioned for his men to take the horses. "Come," he said, "you will stand before my fire. Then I decide." They led Eli through the canyon into the Apache camp, hidden deep between red cliffs. Smoke curled from the fires, and children peered out from behind hides, whispering at the sight of a white man walking among them. The camp was alive with color, painted tents, beadwork, the smell of cooked maize, but Eli felt like a ghost walking through it. They stopped before a great fire at the center. The chief stood tall beside it, his daughters on either side. The whole tribe gathered around, their eyes cold and watchful. Eli's shoulder burned, but he didn't flinch. Taza stepped forward. "You say you saved them. Tell me why." Eli took a breath. His voice came low but firm. "Because I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I saw 2 people dying out there. Didn't matter who they were, Chief. They needed help. I've seen too much death already to add more by doing nothing." The chief's eyes narrowed. "And what did you want in return?" "Gold, horses, peace from our raids." "Nothing," Eli said, shaking his head. "Didn't even think I'd live to see the end of it." The fire crackled between them. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Alla stepped forward. "Father," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "he saved Noke's life. Mine too. Hunters shot him, but he kept riding. Without him, we not be here." Noke nodded quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "He good man, father. Good heart." The chief's gaze softened at his daughter's words, but only slightly. He turned to Eli again. "You carry our blood on your hands," he said slowly. "Not from killing, but from saving. That is a heavy thing." Eli frowned. "I'll carry it if that's what it takes." The chief's lips twitched. Maybe the ghost of a smile, maybe just the shadow of surprise. Then he turned to his people and spoke in Apache, his voice rising like thunder. The words rolled through the camp, commanding, powerful. The crowd murmured in reply. Finally, he raised his hand, and silence fell. He looked back at Eli. "You came here knowing you could die," he said. "Few men do that without reason. My daughter's live because of you. For this, I cannot take your life." Alla gasped softly. Noke pressed her hands together in gratitude. But the chief wasn't finished. He took a step closer to Eli, his face inches away. "But understand this, you are no longer just a man of the white world. You saved my blood, that binds you. From this day, the Apache call you brother. You walk safe in our land, but the bond cuts both ways. If ever you break it, you will answer to me." Eli nodded, stunned. "I wouldn't dishonor it, Chief." Taza studied him, then gave a single nod. He turned and spoke to the tribe again. This time, there were cheers, not loud, but deep and proud. 2 warriors stepped forward, removing the rope that had bound Eli's hands. Alla smiled faintly, and Noke laughed through her tears. That night, the tribe held a feast. Firelight danced against the canyon walls, and drums echoed through the night air. Eli sat beside Alla and Noke, his arm freshly wrapped in clean bandages, his stomach full for the first time in weeks. He listened to their songs, songs of survival, of family, of the spirits that guard the brave. For the first time in his life, he felt something close to peace. Alla spoke quietly beside him. "You different, Eli Turner. Most men fear us, you not." Eli smiled, gazing at the flames. "I was scared plenty," he admitted. "Just didn't let it stop me." She nodded slowly, respect flickering in her eyes. "That courage, we honor." Later, when most had gone to rest, the chief approached the fire. He stood behind Eli, silent for a while. Then he said, "You have good heart, cowboy. The land needs more men like you. Go back to your home, fix your earth, live honest. You will not be alone anymore." Eli turned, surprised. "Not alone." The chief gestured toward the sisters. "They will visit. You have friends among us now. The world is not so divided as men make it." Before dawn, the camp was quiet again. Eli rose to leave, his shoulder sore but healing, his heart heavy with something new, belonging. As he saddled his horse, Noke ran to him, pressing a woven bracelet into his palm. "For luck," she said softly. "So spirits remember you." Allah stood behind her, her face unreadable but her voice steady. Ride safe, brother. Eli nodded. I will. He rode out as the sun rose, painting the cliffs gold. He didn't look back until he reached the ridge. There, far below, he saw them, Allah and Noki standing beside their father, the morning light glinting off their hair. He raised a hand in farewell. They raised theirs in return. As he turned toward home, he felt a desert wind on his face, the same cruel wind that once carried only loneliness. Now it carried something else. Something sacred. The memory of two sisters he'd saved, and the chief's words echoing in his heart. You walk safe in our land, brother. And from that day forward, the poor rancher who had nothing was known across both worlds, not for his land, nor his wealth, but for the courage that bound hearts stronger than blood ever could.